So it's my pleasure to introduce our first speaker today, WSU Extension Forester Andy Curlybird. Many of you already probably know Andy from his years of providing technical educational opportunities for small forest landowners across the state. In this time of COVID, many of his efforts have been online webinars and numerous emails and helpful links. And if you're not already on his email list, that's something you might consider doing. So for more information about Andy and his contact information, and really all of our speakers today, refer to their biographies, and that should have been attached to the session announcement, or you can go to our website. So Andy's presentation will be giving you ideas on things you should consider when selling your timber or other forest products from your property. Doing a timber sale or selling products is a big deal for a landowner, and you need to be well prepared ahead of time. I hope this will help you. So Andy, go ahead.
Fantastic. All right. Well, no time for jokes now, although I have a really good one, and I can't wait to see everybody face to face and tell this awesome new joke that I have. So thank you very much for this opportunity to talk to you about options, choices, and resources when harvesting timber. I'm going to discuss some information that I believe you ought to know before logging. A better title of my presentation might have been Planning with the End in Mind, or Managing Your Forest for the Future. I don't sell logs as a day job, and luckily we have a very talented panel of presenters that do this, and they keep their finger on the pulse of the markets and the trends. Most of my time is spent researching and teaching landowners how to grow trees. And a huge part of my program is forest protection. How do I help primarily family forest owners achieve their management objectives, reduce risk, protect the health and beauty of your land and your financial investments? So quickly, I'm going to introduce you to one resource because some of you probably have not participated in WSU programs. Of course, the very best way to learn is out in the woods, but we'll do our best here today. So WSU Extension provides a variety of different learning opportunities and delivery methods and resources for landowners. It is the land grant institution, but there's also there's another land grant institution that many people aren't aware of, and that's the Northwest Indian College. And so there are a number of Indian land grants throughout the United States, as well as the state land grant as WSU. But what we do is we provide unbiased, research-based, peer-reviewed information. And I mentioned that this is a relationship. Many of you I've known for my entire career, and many of you I've known several generations of your family. So it really is just like growing trees, and we're kind of in this together for the long haul. I wanted to introduce you to our team up in the Northwest. Brendan White and Kevin Zobrist serve that vicinity. Patrick Schultz, our moderator, he serves the Southwest Washington. Sean Alexander is our newest team member, and he serves the Northeast. And then I cover the east slope of the Cascades and the Blues, and a couple other outlier counties. So we do our best, and with these regions. We don't do it alone, and we have a ton of cooperators. This is just an example of several of the other participants that when it makes sense, we work together and collaborate on programming. Okay, thinking about logging, being informed about logging and staying in charge of the job will determine if your job will turn out good, bad, or ugly. And I stole that line from my predecessor, Don Hanley. But it's very true. You have multiple roles of responsibility as a landowner. You have a role as a family member. You have a role as a business partner, and you have a role as an owner. And you have to see your management role in different perspectives. And maybe you're a forester, and so you're the family's forester, and so you have a family, a business, and you're the owner's technical expert. So there's a lot on your shoulders, and you have to see things from a variety of different ways. You want the end result to be ecologically sustainable, and so you want the soils to be stable and productive at the end of the day, water management clean and functional, the recovery from the management to be fast with the diversity of plants coming back in. You want your job to be economically healthy, where you're having the greatest benefits versus the costs. You want it to be legally safe, so you don't want to have issues with trespass and boundaries, water restrictions and unstable slopes. You'll have reforestation requirements, slash management laws, all of these. So what you see here is a busy timber harvest operation. I love this picture. It's from the 1950s. And a timber harvest is likely the most complicated forest management activity that you will undertake during your time here on Earth. Let's see. Far out of here. But like anything, the more you do it, the more familiar it becomes and the less complicated it gets. And for most small family forest owners, you will only do this once or maybe twice in your lifetime. So I describe timber harvest as adored, reward, abhorred, or ignored. Adored, these sentiments pretty much capture how everybody feels during the process of a timber harvest. And you know, some people adore what they're doing. It's the ringing of the bell, the moment that you have been waiting for. All your hard work is coming together. You're about to welcome a new life onto your property. And many landowners take great pride in regenerating their woods. It's a reward. It's a reason for families and communities to come together. And hopefully money will be made. Your land will look new and different. And like always, it's always changing. Abhorred. This could be a point of contention. Timber harvest can be a point of contention with families and neighbors. And this workshop is about selling logs and not land. So our assumption is that you are attending this workshop in order to best perpetuate the forest instead of converting it to another use. This would require a completely different council than what we're prepared to address today. But hang in there, because there's still going to be some good information if you're selling logs and land. And then there's ignored. Perhaps you feel the trees are money in the bank. It's a standing bank account. Perhaps you're like my dad, and trying new things is really different. So you never really get around to doing anything. Maybe you're nervous that you're going to damage your woods. Maybe you think a harvest will impact the wildlife habitat. Maybe you don't have time to learn about how to do it right. So let me tell you that there's no real right or wrong way in forestry. That's why the definition of forestry includes the word art and science of growing trees for an objective. We often joke that forestry isn't rocket science, it's harder. and it's harder because of all the uncertainty that you face from the time you plant a tree until it is harvested. So I want you to think about why log. And as I mentioned, the timber sale is the most complicated activities involved in the management of your forest. So why harvest? You need the money and the time is right. Do you need the money but the time is wrong? Are you trying to reduce fire hazard or some other damaging impact? Maybe it's a windstorm salvage. So try to figure out what your problem is and why you even want to harvest in the first place. And is it urgent? Is there some pressing issue? Or maybe it's an opportunity. Perhaps it's a market opportunity. Perhaps it's a death in the family. I have seen death in families cause families to cut timber before they were ready in order to just pay estate taxes. And I've seen families need to sell half of their land in order to afford to keep the other half for the same estate tax reasons. It doesn't have to be that way, not with planning. So what are you trying to accomplish? Are you trying to regenerate a new forest? Are you thinning an existing stand for some sort of forest health improvement? Think about who is impacted by this management. You, your family, your neighbors. When I saw where are they, I also mean what do they, what does everybody think? Where are they in their state in life? Or is your family ready for this? And how will you do it? Who will be involved and who's on your team? And the good news is there's lots of help out there, and that's kind of what I'm going to be talking about today. So the announcement that came out said that we're talking about options, choices, and resources. So here you go. And don't hesitate to reach out to your local government service foresters like the DNR. Some of them call themselves landowner assistants. Some of them call themselves small forest landowner office. Some people call themselves stewardship foresters. They will all help you fall into the right hands if they're not the exact perfect person to help you answer questions like, I'm thinking about logging. What's my fair share? Is a handshake good enough? Some of those kind of questions. They can come out and take a walk in the woods with you. Conservation districts, NRCS, extension. We can all help to validate your own research that you've conducted. University publications are good. As you see on this slide, there's a bunch of different publications out there, and they all provide excellent information. I would encourage you to look for things that are prepared by universities, or I would hope that all state agencies have been vetted as well. Oops. Have been vetted as well, but at least university extension pubs have been. Back far enough? Sorry. Okay. And I also always encourage you to seek a second opinion, even on my own stuff. Okay, take advantage of free advice, but keep in mind that free can turn out to be expensive. And there's no hiding the fact that most of us simply cannot resist the gratifying sensation of having once again beat the system by not having to pay a dime for something. So in the case of free advice, many organizations, including WSU, can provide some limited service, but it usually won't be all that you need, and will likely fall far short of the attention that you'll need to manage your timber sale. And it's all the way up here. Okay. And a financial investment creates a link that puts a premium on one's commitment. And I'll get into this more in a couple of slides. And don't forget that conservation districts also have some foresters now. That didn't used to be the case necessarily, at least in Washington State, but there's several in Southwest Washington and in Eastern Washington as well. Okay, machines without a single button may be just what you need, but maybe not. Okay, so the regeneration system, the time of year, the terrain, the timber type, and the complexity, the accessibility, markets, resource protections, these all contribute to the best decision for your harvest system. So often there's a combination of harvest systems that you'll need, in which in turn have their own unique logistics considerations. So the rubber-tired skidder driven by a neighbor at the end of the road is frequently not the least cost method. So this is the moment that you've been waiting for. This is where the most important part of my job is putting myself into your shoes and seeing things from your perspective. So here's what I would do. I would do everything above. I would take the free advice, do a bunch of online research. I would collect basic inventory data, and I can do all of this because I've done all this for over half my life. So I have the experience in doing these sorts of things. Many of you may not, but there are services out there that can help you with that. I would focus on my problem. What's the question, or what's my goal? What am I trying to achieve? And I would also consider my tolerance to the consequences if I do nothing. And so an example for me, I live in a little bitty town called Cashmere, and we're on the east slope of the Cascades, and it is an extreme wildfire hazard risk area. So I would be thinking all the time, what am I doing to reduce my fire hazard, and what am I doing to abate this risk? I would not be talked into harvesting timber. You've probably received unsolicited offers to buy your timber. Maybe you've been told by neighbors or people you even don't know that you're at risk of bark beetles or something like that. Many times you will have quote suggested that a few more acres could be added to this harvest here or there. But just remember, you call the shots, and I would hire the right consulting forester to help me manage my timber sale and to market my timber. A consulting forester is supposed to work in your best interest, not the loggers and not the mills. Not all foresters are created equally. So there's a couple of directories that you can search out, a couple of different associations that do validate the qualifications of foresters. And like I say, they're not all foresters not created equal. Some people are really good at writing plans, but have little experience or no experience managing timber sales. Some people, they're limited to their knowledge of markets because they just don't work very far from home. So think about that. Ask your service agency foresters and talk to the landowner associations. Ask them who they use, because you will be left with the job. Make sure you get the right forester, one that fits your needs and your pace and your scale. And I have a whole other program about how to select a consulting forester, and we're not going to go into that today. Okay, and WSU, not to be outdone by the other directories, we have our own directory. So look at that. It's an opt-in. So there's a lot of different people in there, and you can see the information that we use to say, hey, people have joined our directory, and we're not vouching for anybody. So talk to us and ask us who would be a good fit. I want to tell you a story. This is why I would hire a consulting forester. Here's a couple, Jack and Lois Sutherland from Snohomish County. They had some old alder that they needed to sell. And so they started to take bids. It was moving a little slow. Jack is an engineer, very sharp fella. But he reached out to a consulting forester, Ron Monroe, and asked Ron to help him manage his timber sale. They received 4 bids. 3 were $50,000, and 1 bid was $250,000. So Jack did very well. Ron managed the whole thing. He did the forest practice applications, the road maintenance and abandonment, the engineering and the surveying, the permitting, drainage, bridge, harvest, slash management, reforestation, cleanup. So he did everything. And this presentation purposefully avoids the discussion of logging job costs as well. And that's another class. But there are many, both fixed and variable costs. So here's the kind of expectations you can have from a consulting forester. A forester will help you blend your long-term management goals with specific practices. And for example, I showed horse logging here. Not very common, but for this landowner, it was a small-scale piece of forest land, and he was interested in building trails. Well, if you want to have trails, do some horse logging, because they will definitely leave a trail. Their impact is not low. It's very high, in fact, but it's very localized. So in this case, he had a really nice trail left over to walk on. In bold here are all of the different components of what I see are involved in a timber sale or in a logging job. And these are the types of things that you can expect for services from a consulting forester. Especially with valuation and merchantability, but check references. When you hire a consulting forester, check references and find out from others if they had good experiences. There should be a written agreement for the services provided and the fee that's charged. And you will get a fiduciary. You'll want to have the fiduciary responsibility because they are working in their client's best interest before their own, and that's what sets them apart from log buyers, mills, who also provide excellent forestry services. I've never had a bad experience myself, but just keep in mind that a consulting forester is working for you, and they shouldn't be working for anybody else. And there's large sums at stake here. There's a lot that goes into the marketing, scaling, grading, sorts, jargon, and different perception. I say perception because what looks like a straight log to you is not what looks like a straight log to a scaler. So the bureau grades, peelers, all sorts of different sizes, sorts. For Japan sort, that's what the J sort is. There's a China sort, there's a Korean sort. There's throwing it all together in the back of a log truck that they call camp run. There's chip and saw, or what you might know on the east side as hew saw. And there's all sorts of different length and diameter breaks, and then how to deal with oversized logs. Those are things that consulting forester knows where these things go. They know the different mills that are buying, the transportation cost to send it from one place to another, and they'll do all that economic work for you. Your level of engagement will also help. Like I mentioned before, there's several things that you can do yourself, but there's some things you may need help with. They can also, Consulting foresters can also help tip you off to other markets, different opportunities for even non-timber forest products, such as the western white pine that they used for Christmas, that this family manages their white pine trees for Christmas greenery. And the lower picture there is a redwood stand over on Hood Canal, the Hamma Tree Farm. And specialty products, blue stain wood, burl wood. They may know where somebody, some carpenter or some wood shop is looking for certain types of materials. Consulting foresters can help you manage through forest health issues as well. And again, agency foresters are available for you too. And there's some other resources. The Forest Health Highlights come out every year, as well as a set of maps. And they're really good. I can't wait to crack the cover every year. And people laugh at me because I say that. They think I'm being facetious. But I really do look forward to reading the Forest Health Highlights. Consulting foresters can help you with wildlife considerations on your property. What do you do? You know, what happens if I log? What happens if I don't log? Most landowners hold wildlife in very high regard. They can help you through regulatory hoops and channels. And there's there's a couple of services out there through the DNR. That is your regulatory authority. In case you were wondering, always go to the DNR first, and they will bring in any other parties that are needed, such as the affected tribes, anything with water quality or fisheries. They'll bring in all those people as needed. But the first person you want to go to is your DNR forest practices coordinator or your local office, and they'll hook you up with your forester. And there's also somebody who could come out and help you work through the application process through the small forest landowner office. Consulting foresters can also help you with your issues. Hopefully there won't be any issues with trespass investigations or loss of timber as part of your neighbor's activities. And I believe that's it. About 3 minutes ahead of time, and I'll hold questions till the end. Thank you very much for your attention, and I sincerely appreciate the attendance that we have. And please reach out to myself or any of the other WSU Extension foresters, and if we can't help you, we'll definitely make sure that we find the right person who can. So, thank you.
Well, thanks, Andy. And well, thanks for keeping it on time. I appreciate that a lot. And so I know Andy had a lot of information there. And if you have questions for Andy, and I'm sure you will, you've got his contact information. And then also you can type questions into the chat box. People are starting to do that. And then we'll have an answer and our question and answer period at the end of today's session. So there'll be more on that later on. The Washington Tree Farm program is very pleased to bring together a panel of industry experts on timber markets. Our panelists have a lot of information squeezed into a short time, and we hope you find this segment useful to your tree farm management. We're going to start out by talking about current market conditions and how we got to this point in time. For the second half of our time, the panel will give their thoughts on timber markets, what they may look like in the future. So first, what I'm going to do is introduce each of our 4 panelists and let them tell you a little bit about the company they work for, the kinds of logs they manufacture or sell, and a kind of products they produce. And so we're just going to take a few minutes each. So we're going to start out with Bill Turner. Bill is the Washington Log Procurement Manager for Sierra Pacific Industries. So Bill, do you want to go ahead and do your introduction?
I will. Hopefully you can hear me. My name is Bill Turner, and I'll adjust my camera now that I can see myself. Washington Log Procurement Manager for Sierra Pacific Industries. I'm based in Shelton, Washington. We do have 4 mills in Washington, one in Shelton, Aberdeen, Burlington, and Centralia. Sierra Pacific is a family-owned company. The 4 mills that we have, we produce dimensional lumber out of Douglas fir and hemlock or studs out of the same 2 species. We own about 300,000 acres here in the state of Washington. Also own a little over 2 million acres. Most of that is in California. We've got, along with the mills, we at both Aberdeen and Burlington, we have a biomass cogeneration plants where we produce energy. We power over 36,000 homes, enough power to provide energy for about 36,000 homes in the state of Washington. The kind of logs that we look for, again, are Douglas fir and hemlock. We're a small to medium sized log user. So small, 5-inch on the small end, up to about 30 inches on the big end is what we look for. And we buy from folks that have down to 1 load all the way up to several thousand loads. So we will work with landowners and similar to what Andy said. That's my introduction.
Well, thanks, Bill. Our next speaker is Brian Carnes, and Brian is the log buyer for Cascade Hardwood Group, and we really appreciate Brian helping us out today. His boss, Gerald Alder, was going to do this, but had a conflict. So thanks for being with us today, Brian.
Thanks, Tom. Yeah, my name is Brian Carnes. I'm a log buyer for Cascade Hardwood Group. We have 2 mills, Cascade Hardwood that's in Chehalis, Washington, and Port Angeles Hardwood that is in Port Angeles. Cascade Hardwood Group is a family-owned business. We directly employ 218 people between the 2 facilities in Washington. At our mills, the main species that we cut is red alder, and we do some minor species there as well with big leaf maple, ash, birch, and black cottonwood. The minor species, really depends on the market at the time if we're cutting it or not. So just make sure that you call ahead before you're cutting your timber to make sure that we're harvesting that that we're milling that at the time. Unlike a dimensional mill or stud mill, we cut random width boards. What's best grade, I guess, would be the way to say it, out of the log. We do multiple thicknesses: 4/4, 5/4, 6/4, 8/4, 10/4, and 12/4 logs. 8, 10, and 12 foot in length on our lumber. We have about 16 grades in our alder, so it's a little different than the Doug fir and the softwood type markets. And then we also do cut pallet material at both facilities, and then our mill in Port Angeles deals in alder pulp, and our facility there at Cascade handles mixed pulp, basically any kind of hardwood type pulp at our facility. So that's what I got for the introduction.
Yeah, thanks. Appreciate it, Brian. Our next speaker is Eric Owen. Eric is the Director of Log Procurement for Alder Forest Products, which is, you'll learn, that is a cedar manufacturer. So Eric, if you want to do your introduction.
Okay, can everybody see me there? Okay, good. Hey, thanks for putting this on, guys. My name is Eric Owen, Director of Log Procurement here at Alder Forest Products. Alder Forest Products was formed about 3 years ago following a merger with TMI Forest Products and Welco. Some of you may remember those names. The company currently operates 4 mills, 3 in Washington and 1 in Idaho. Our primary product is cedar fence boards. Our mill out by Aberdeen, out by Amanda Park, we also manufacture some whitewood fence boards out of spruce and hemlock. The company currently consumes about 80 million feet of western red cedar a year. We employ a little over 500 people. and we supply about 80% of the market for Western red cedar boards nationally. So that requires us to source a significant number of logs, as you can imagine. We currently buy from Oregon, Washington, Idaho, Montana, Alaska, and Canada. We have remote buy locations throughout in 7 different locations, and we have 5 log buyers stationed in different regions throughout the West Coast to make sure we're taking care of local landowners. As mentioned, the primary product that we buy is Western red cedar, log lengths from 16 to 36, 5-inch and up in diameter. If you're out by the harbor, by Grays Harbor, Aberdeen area, we also buy spruce and Western hemlock. So look forward to talking to you guys a little bit more about current markets and the current trends, but that's what I have for now.
Yeah, thanks, Eric. Appreciate that. So our next speaker is Duane Evans, and Duane is a Senior Vice President and General Manager for Port Blakely Pacific Lumber and Shipping International. So go ahead, Duane, and do your introduction.
Okay, I'm Duane Evans, and I work actually, PLS International is one of the Port Blakely companies. So, so the parent companies owns Timberland, and we are the log trading division of that. We ship logs either break bulk or in containers to China, Korea, and Japan. We ship. We also have a yard down in out of Savannah, Georgia. We ship logs to India, Vietnam, and also China from Southern Pine. We have satellite yards in Washington. We had one in Shelton, one in Tumwater, and one in Frederickson. We shipped container logs to Korea and Japan or China from there. And then our primary log yard is Longview, and we do most of that is break bulk. And we source logs as far down as Southern Oregon, all the way up into maybe around north of Tacoma. So what we do is bring logs into the yard, and then we resort them into specific sorts for customers that want certain diameters or quality logs, and so we ship those on the ship. So that's it's not a really complicated business, but it's very high stress. A lot of things going on, really fast as the market changes. So we try to adapt as quickly as possible to the changing conditions of the marketplace and also our customers' needs. So that's all I got for PLS.
Hey, thanks, Duane. And thanks to all of you for the introduction of your companies. And I hope everybody appreciates the expertise of our speakers we got today. So I would like to start our discussion around today's markets, where we are today, but also really want to look at kind of the background of events and changes over the years that have got us to where we are today. So the first question is for Bill Turner. With the Northwest Forest Plans, Spotted Owl, and other regulations, we saw a major shift in timber supply from large logs from the federal lands that were no longer available. Many mills went out of business within a few years, and we witnessed a transformation of the industry, both with large land ownerships and also the sawmills. When we were planning this seminar last fall, log prices were down and not much positive on the horizon. Bill, can you talk about how we got to where we are today, and what is the status of Douglas fir and hemlock lumber markets and log prices? Bill?
Sure. It's I think Duane touched on it a bit there. It is a fast-moving marketplace always. But let me take your questions kind of in reverse order, probably get to where we are today. We're all on video today for a reason. That's the COVID. We all started this year off pretty optimistic in the wood products business. We're expecting some higher takeaways, higher housing starts, and then March happened. Everything shut down. I shouldn't say everything. We have such an integrated business. Think back to March. The first stay-home orders came in, and paper towels and toilet paper became the hot commodities. So immediately, pulp mills were thinking, wow, we can't make enough pulp and paper products with this going on. On the other hand, lumber and plywood, our lumber salesmen and plywood sales across the nation, the phone stopped ringing. And people said, well, we got to slow down. Well, since in Washington and across the nation, for the most part, wood products were considered an essential business. We kept producing, though at a lower level, because we just couldn't get the takeaway with lumber sales. Short term, well, April started happening, the phones started ringing again, and then May, things really started picking up. And I think Nick has a slide that I can show you kind of how the housing market reacted to the marketplace. It immediately shut down and then it started ramping up. And Nick, if you can pop that slide number 1 in. All that being said, that gets and affects the log market. So the log market immediately in early spring shut down, and you can see how housing bounced back. Don't worry about the numbers. Look at the relative measure on the graphs, and that's what we faced. You know, at the end of March, it was like, holy cow, nothing's going to happen. Then we've been jumping, and when August numbers come out, we're going to see it's probably the high point of the year so far. So the markets right now are pretty darn good. In fact, right now, our log prices I was looking at last year at this time versus this year at this time, we're about 50% higher right now than we were last year at this time is what we're paying for logs. It's a very good market. A lot of people are putting more wood into the market because of that. So could anybody have predicted this at the time? No, I don't think so. I didn't. I certainly didn't. And most of us felt that it was going to be a very difficult year after the shutdown started. What's driving the market? Well, housing's good, but really what's driving the market is the repair and remodel market and the do-it-yourself market. Home Depot is having a record year. Lowe's is having a record year. People are staying at home. All those projects, all of us, me included, have put off. I've spent a couple extra dollars in Home Depot trying to get some of those projects done at home. So where are we going to go from here? I mean, for you listening to this and trying to schedule what you want to do, what's it going to look like next year? Great question. There's a lot of things that can happen. There's a lot that's going to go into it. What happens during the election? Once the extra payments for the unemployment benefits start drying up, how is that going to affect the overall economy and the recovery? I wish I had an answer, but we're going to have to wait and see. One thing we do know is a lot of people are fleeing the cities and are figuring this working from home can really help them out. And a lot of companies are thinking, well, this might be a better way for some of it to go, and maybe not full-time in office, but more. So there is a lot of building going in smaller towns and medium-sized towns, and people are looking to get out of the cities if they can. So Tom also mentioned, okay, over the last 20 years, we've had a reduction in mills in the state of Washington. And how has that affected the log market? And similar to our company, well, 20 years ago, we didn't have any mills in Washington. Now we are the largest lumber producer in the state of Washington. We saw opportunity here. And though there are fewer number of mills, the amount of lumber and plywood produced is pretty close to the same. And Nick, if you flip over to slide 2, instead of looking at the number of mills, it's probably easier. And if you look at the black line on top, that's the one to pay attention to. And that's the total harvest in the state of Washington. We've averaged about 3 billion board feet over the last 18 years. And you can see high points and you can see low points. And there is a slight reduction over that time if you draw a straight line through it, but it's not a huge reduction. And some of those years, Duane and the exporters have purchased a bigger market share. Other years, like this year, export is down and domestic is up. but we're going to probably still see in that 3 billion board foot range of sales. So some markets are usually good or bad. And it's kind of a complementary system. It's a very integrated system. We all rely on each other. If export goes away completely, there's not enough milling infrastructure currently. Would some be built? Yes. If domestic production goes away, would more export happen or export into Oregon or Idaho? Yeah, probably so. It's going to find a balance. So yes, there's a fewer number of mills, but all the wood is still being utilized. The mills have become more productive. So sometimes it means you have to truck a little bit further, especially if you're in the center part of the state. That's where the milling infrastructure is really taking a hit. Western Washington, there's a very dynamic industry. It's good. Eastern Washington, Kettle Falls, Colville, and then you can tap into Idaho real quickly. There's milling infrastructure and competition there. The center part of the state is the more difficult marketplace. Tom also asked, what's the competition? How does competition affect the market for logs? Well, just like anything, competition is what drives it. And in Western Washington, it is dynamic, and we are seeing good markets. As log sellers, as Andy said, call around, get quotes from several mills, or if you have a consulting forester, they'll do that. But you'll always look for somebody that you can feel comfortable with and do business with. So just keep as many people you can talk to. You're going to find somebody you want to do business with. It's like when you're going to put a new roof on your house. You don't just call one contractor. Call several contractors, get several quotes. I've probably missed a question you had in there, Tom, but that's what I got now, unless you think I forgot something.
No, not at all. The only thing I was going to say is, you said prices are up 50%. So do you think the supply is there to meet the demand, or we've always wondered about that? We don't have enough timber, but what's your ideas on that?
Yeah, thus far there is. Like I said, our lumber markets are good. So we've actually been running some extra shifts on Saturdays at some of our mills. And we're able to gather up those logs. Because the domestic market is so strong this year, we're outpacing the export market right now. And so that's what's providing that extra wood, so we can have that extra production for ourselves. If the export market was strong at the same time, yeah, we'd be arm wrestling over every stick. So and we do, and whether we arm wrestle with the export market or other domestic mills, nobody gives you anything. You purchase everything.
Yeah. Well, thanks, Bill. And then when we do our next segment, yeah, it's good now. It'll be fun to hear what you think about the future. So our next question is for Brian. Alder has been considered a forest weed species, and then it became a very sought after product. A whole new industry of mills and lumber grades were developed for red alder. I remember a harvest we did in 2007 for the company I worked for, where the alder averaged $1,000 per 1,000 board feet. Alder manufacturing and prices have changed. Where is the demand for alder and other hardwood species today, and how did we get to this point, Brian?
Okay, well, I'll start with what your comment there, the weed species. Myself, as like many other foresters, spent a lot of our time in our career trying to get rid of hardwoods out of our plantations, and we all did a pretty good job of it. So today, alder's about 2 to 4% of an average harvest. With that being said, there's a demand out there for the volume that is growing on everybody's property, I guess I would say. It may not always seem that way with the way prices are today or what they've been lately for the hardwood market. Over the last 10 years, we've seen multiple hardwood mills shut down in Western Washington. And this is due to multiple reasons, but the biggest reason that I believe is the lack of hardwood logs in Western Washington. Another reason is that, like all mills over time, hardwood mills have done upgrades and made changes to their facilities to run faster and more economically. basically, like Bill said, there's less mills, but they're more efficient. Therefore, our existing mills are producing more lumber than previously and consuming more logs than they did in the past. Just for example, our mill in Cascade and originally ran 2 shifts, and now we run 1 shift with the same amount of volume every day. So as a log buyer, I'm always getting asked, when are the alder prices coming back up? Over time, all of our markets have moved up and down. And it seems like in the hardwood market that about every 10 years or so that we have a big spike in alder prices. For example, in the mid 90s, prices were way up there, like Tom said, $1,200, $1,400, $1,000 for the 12-inch plus type log. 2007, 2008, we had another spike in that market where they were right in that same vicinity, maybe even a little bit higher in some places. And then again in the 2017 and the beginning of 2018, we had that same kind of spike in the market where things were pushing $1,000 a thousand. But if you look at the historical range price of alder, we're at that historical average number today, maybe a little bit below, but it's creeping back up to that number where, we're always at, about the same number except for the spikes. So, the next question is, you said, how did we get here? In my thoughts, there's kind of 3 ways that we've got here. The first is about 2 years ago, the demand for our lumber overseas drastically started to drop. And I can't explain to you why it started before the tariffs even started, but it just, I don't know if they're finding other wood supplies or other wood baskets to get their product from, is probably the best thing to say. The second thing is the tariffs did hit us again. And then when the tariffs hit, it started to lower the demand more overseas. Not so much here for our tariffs, we're less than 10% for alder and maple tariffs at the time. Unlike the East Coast where some of the red oak and those got hit with like a 25% tariff. And then third, as Bill said also, is this pandemic. We've been hit hard again, and we're starting to see a little bit of uptick of our lumber moving. We haven't got the price increases and the higher demand that from the remodelers and those kind of situations, but we're more, just experiencing more lumber moving. So hopefully our market will tick up and we can, start raising prices accordingly. So that's basically what I've got and how we got here.
So one of my questions is, and you mentioned that right now you're not buying maple and some of the other minor species. Is that correct? Or no,
yeah.
It's just the alder looking for now? Right.
Right now, we are buying a little bit of maple now, but it's just kind of on a case-by-case basis. We buy it when we have the need to, to mill it. All the hardwood mills have a pretty substantial inventory of lumber. We've been, producing the same pace for the last 2 years, even with the market being down. So until we can get rid of some lumber inventory, you're going to see that, where we don't really need those minor species as much. We do cut cottonwood at our Port Angeles facility occasionally, same kind of situation there. Same with ash, birch. We do a little bit of white oak occasionally, but it's been really tough for those because they're more of a low grade type species or product that you produce, and a little bit tougher to get rid of and make it economically make sense for us.
In their lumber sales, you said, and I think a lot of it was going overseas. And then, so that's kind of changed some. Do you see them developing more markets domestically now for your products, or?
Yeah, and we have. So when you start taking the same amount of production, and then you take 35, 40% of it that was going overseas, then you have to find a new home for that. You know, that's kind of what we had to do, which, you know, we've changed that to other overseas destinations other than just China. China was the big one that was buying most of the, you know, overseas export volume for us. And then just diversify to as many different outlets that you can find, you know, in the US. The domestic side for us is really gained traction here in the last, you know, year or so, you know, having to diversify a lot. So, you know, our lumber sales guys are out there every day trying to find new homes and, you know, diversify everything we can do.
Okay. Hey, thanks a lot, Brian.
Yep.
So next we have Eric. Western red cedar, even though considered a minor forest tree species, continues to be sought after for manufacturing. You know, historically, we talked about the large, fine grain, old growth cedar that was used for a wide range of products like shaken shingles for roofing and home siding and decking because of its resistance to decay. And then even interior uses because of its rich beauty. We are now harvesting second and third growth cedar. How have cedar manufacturing and log markets changed over the years, and where are we at now? Eric?
Yeah, thanks, Tom. Yeah, so all good questions, of course. You know, and cedar still does remain as a very desirable product. You know, it's developed somewhat of what I would call an iconic status over the years. It's sought after as much, it seems like these days, for its nostalgic appeal as it is for its intrinsic properties. Everybody likes the way cedar looks and smells, and it's really one of the you know, the top of the conifer species is for all those reasons. You mentioned old growth versus second growth or young growth, I'll call it. You know, the old growth was you know, obviously the initially harvested material, and it was used for shakes, shingles, fine grain trim, those sort of things when it first became a commercial species. Because most of the old growth is gone now, that market is somewhat of a boutique market. There's still a pretty robust shake and shingle market, but it's mainly on the East Coast. Nothing like it used to. Alta does consume some old growth we buy out of Alaska, but it just gets planted into our regular fence production. A little higher grade board, but it does get consumed into that as well. So you know, the price of the old growth too has just become cost prohibitive, so much so that it's somewhat, again, become a boutique product that is not really commercially used in a lot of applications on a retail level anymore. By contrast, the young growth or the second growth, you know, that's where Alta focuses. It's probably 90–95% of all the logs we purchase and consume are young growth. Second and third growth represents, you know, I'm even envious of Brian's 2 to 4% by stand. We're hovering around 2% and going down steadily. So the supply is steadily shrinking as more forests move to plantation, Douglas fir, and hemlock. So we're seeing a slow evaporation of our supply. Because it's plantation, you know, oriented, the logs have become smaller over time. Less defect, but smaller for sure. So you asked, Tom, about what has changed in our manufacturing process. You know, because of the log size, our mills have become very focused on speed, as a lot of the mills have these days, where a lot of the technology upgrades are focused on throughput to lower manufacturing costs. Second, we've focused a lot on recovery as well, meaning we're trying to get more product out of the logs we consume, and that's just due to the high price of the raw materials. And I think both of those changes, you know, a third benefit or thing we focused on for improved manufacturing is just a reduction in personnel. Not that we don't want to employ people. In fact, we have just fantastic pay and benefits package, but it's really hard to get people. So, you know, that's one of the third things that's really changed in the last few years is just more automation. And so the real crux though of why those three things matter is because you know Alta wants to maintain its status as the largest manufacturer of cedar fence boards, and to keep cedar a commercially viable species. We don't want to see second growth cedar go the way of old growth, where it becomes more of a boutique thing that people can't afford, and it just becomes a more of a novelty. So, you know, those are steps we've taken to really prop up or maintain or actually lead the cedar fence board market. So the question is, what do we see long term for the cedar market? I already mentioned supply is tightening. We don't see that reversing. I mean, that is going to continue to be the way of the future. It's going to cause more consolidation in the industry. Unfortunately, you'll probably see fewer mills, but bigger, faster mills over time. The good news for landowners is it should result in continued high prices for the product, as long as we can keep it commercially viable, which we don't see that becoming a problem anytime soon, decades from now. So how are we, I mentioned mill consolidation. We don't want a landowner in Bellingham, Washington, or Coos Bay, Oregon to have to truck logs to Morton, Washington. That really takes us out of the market. So we've, as I mentioned in my intro, we've focused on establishing buy yards in all the different regions, dispersing buyers throughout the region we operate. And so we want to continue to provide access to our mills and to the markets, but by spreading out and having a wide network of locations where folks can deliver logs to. So that's our view long term is the demand is certainly there, excellent demand for cedar fence products, and we feel like we've established a good network to procure the raw materials. I'll touch on this a little bit later, but our biggest challenge is just going to be the substitution effect if prices get too high. That's something we deal with on a regular basis. But just a real quick blurb about current markets. Bill's touched on it, Brian touched on it. We're sort of benefiting from, as I like to call, coronication right now. I mean, we're very, very heavily invested in the home centers, Home Depot, Lowe's, big customers, and those products were just completely cleaned out in April, May, June. And to this day, we still can't keep those stores full because everybody stayed home and built fences and other cedar-based projects. So we're up 25 to 35% pricing-wise from the spring. Probably don't see this demand forever, just as the winter comes and the demand slows. But for the foreseeable next few months, maybe even a couple quarters, prices are definitely up there. And for anybody that's got the opportunity to harvest cedar, it would be a really good time to consider doing that. So hopefully that answered your questions, Tom.
Yeah, thanks very much. I appreciate that, Eric. And then, when we get to the next session, be repeating a few things maybe about the future, but no, that helped a lot. I appreciate that.
You bet.
So our next speaker is Duane Evans. Many changes. The export of logs has been an important market for small forest landowners to give them competitive prices for the trees they grow. Back in 1996, we could get $1,300 per 1,000 board feet for Japanese quality logs. Then in 2013, there were very good markets for hemlock and Douglas fir to China. Just like the sawmill prices, export prices have been very cyclic. Could you talk about the changes in the export markets over the years and where they are today?
Sure, that's a really good question, and probably deserves an explanation because I'll go back up to 1996, and I can't remember the exact date, but the Osaka earthquake in Japan destroyed a bunch of houses. So the Japanese government redid the building codes requiring kiln-dried beams in the traditional houses. But that also opened the door, when they did that, opened the door for glue lambs out of Europe. So now that there's competition between the glue lambs in Europe and the beams, the whole log or solid wood beams out of Japan. I have a graph I want to show you that kind of, if I can do it. Maybe I can. There we go. But it kind of shows you what the export market has done over the last, almost 25 years. And you'll notice that the decline in the Japanese shipments, at one point there was almost 1.5 billion board feet shipped to Japan. And you'll see, like you mentioned, 96, it starts to decline. And it's been declining ever since, except for a small bump up in 2013. But all markets are declining. So, and at least the three major export markets. But you also notice, you mentioned China. So during the Great Recession here in the global financial crisis, China started pumping money into their economy. And like Bill mentioned earlier, a bad domestic market here in the US is really good for exporters, because what it does, it creates an oversupply of logs that we can buy cheaper because we don't have to compete with the domestic market. And so you can see the spike up in the volume to China from 2009 all the way into about 2015. It started to decline again and has been declining ever since. But that's due to global competition and access to more fiber. Because in China, they're not concerned about quality, it's about price. So when the storm damaged and beetle killed spruce in Eastern Europe became available, in probably, actually 2017 started trickling in, they chose that because they were selling it because distressed timber, they had to sell it, and they just sold it for whatever they could sell it for. And China was, just almost a tsunami of wood which declined the market in China anyway. But it also had the impact on Korea, because Korea, all they use is packaging. They do use some of the Northwest species like Douglas fir and hemlock for construction and specialty products. But a lot of the packaging, shipping stuff, they use the European spruce, which is lower quality. So, competition with glulam. Yeah, so like I said, Bill hit it right in the head when he mentioned that the domestic market is booming right now, which is very difficult for exporters to buy logs at a profitable rate. So that's why you're seeing the decline in export. And so, yeah, no, it's really, really tough right now to buy logs and try to make money doing it. So, because in the export business, we charter a ship, and it's the CNF price. So that's what we have to pay. We have to pay the shipping and all the handling and all the wharfage and everything else we have to pay out of our profits. And if we have to pay higher numbers for logs, and it makes it unprofitable. So it's very difficult. So I don't know, did that answer your question about the Japanese and China market?
Yeah, we have a little bit more time, Duane. I was just thinking on the Japanese, you mentioned a couple of reasons why prices were high, but I understood that maybe their building standards and things are changing. Before you would have that J price or J quality log that everybody was familiar with, a 80-year-old log that, produced really nice Douglas fir lumber. So has that been part of the reason that Japanese haven't been as aggressive?
Yeah, it's just like here, a lot of the smaller mills, the specialty mills, have closed. So there's less, maybe because demand, the population's been declining, and this is predicted to decline for several more years. So, less housing starts. And then they're going to a lot of stick frame homes too, away from the traditional homes. What they use the high quality Douglas fir beams for, and which they still do, is for Hirokako beams. It's the headers in their traditional homes that the beams, they don't want them exposed. So, but the problem is the green ones, as we all know, will twist and bend. They're not as stable as the glulam. So they prefer glulams for stability, but then it's just about price. I mean, if they can buy glulams cheaper than they can buy solid beams, they would prefer to do that. So there's that created competition between the sawmills and the importers of glulams too. So it's just a very, like we talked earlier, very complicated global business is what this has turned into. So.
Well, I know I didn't realize it at first, but you mentioned you've been doing some stuff in the southern part of the United States.
Correct.
A few years ago. And I don't know, was that mostly to China? Because, those landowners in the southern part of the states really don't get very good prices for their timber. And I think the export really helped them for a while there. Yeah, well, what happened during the recession is, in the South, they have what they call pulp plantations. So, but as the recession, the demand for lumber went down. So those stands actually grew into saw timber. So, and remember in China, like I said, they're not concerned about quality because all they use it for is foam boards. I mean, all construction in China is concrete. I mean, even single family homes, concrete. So, the demand, and they don't care about the quality because all they're going to do is use it 2 or 3 times and then throw it away or burn it.
you know, so your Southern Yellow Pine works great for that because you can buy it cheaper than you can, you know, Douglas fir or hemlock or spruce up here. So but we just put it in containers and ship it over there.
Thanks, Duane, and when we talk again about the future, that will be interesting to what you have to say there too. Look forward to that. For the next segment, that's what we want to talk about. We'll move the discussion for a look into the future. Just like the stock market or anything else, predicting the future is almost impossible. You know, our panel here today has years of experience and expertise in log markets, and will be able to give us ideas of what our markets may look like in the future as well as anybody else can. So look forward to hearing their ideas and predictions. Again, we'll start with Bill Turner. Sierra Pacific Industries has made major investments in timberland and manufacturing facilities here in Washington. What does it look like for dimension lumber production and markets? And again, you've explained some, but you might talk about that again. I'm looking ahead, the size and the species and the quality of logs that you think will be needed by sawmills. And the other question I'd thrown at you too was, you know, a lot of our small landowners like to prune their trees. And we were always told years ago, you could prune the trees and make a higher quality product. And sometime in our discussion here today after you're done, we might talk about other mills other than just dimension mills that might use some of those products. Okay, thanks.
Sure. Yeah, future, well, I can tell you about our company and our outlook, and I think nationally, I think future-wise is going to be good for the wood products business. There's a lot of reasons for that. One, probably since most of you or all of you are timberland owners too, I'm sure you like me like the look and feel of wood, and it's just a great building material, and that's not going to change or hasn't changed. The other thing it's probably going to become even more desirable is for carbon sequestration issues. Carbon and climate change is going to become more and more part of our lives and more important. And solid wood products in general, whether solid wood or composed products, they do sequester wood for the long term. In the carbon sequestration field, it's called harvested wood products, and what they sequester. So we can sequester on the stump in a tree, or we can sequester in harvested wood products, grow more, and continue to sequester. So that is going to become more important. And as you see, architects are embracing more of the cross-laminated timber and panels to build taller wood buildings. That's going to use more wood products as well. Europe's out in the lead on these construction projects, but the U.S. and Canada especially is doing more and more. But North America's catching up and doing more every year. So as far as our company, we're encouraged. We've invested over $1 billion in the state of Washington since moving here in 2001. And the mills that we own, 3 of them we built from the ground up. They were greenfield operations. We are looking for more opportunities, and if we see them, we will try and expand and grow more. So we're bullish on the lumber business and wood market. Short term, as I said, what's it going to be next year? And as Duane's graph shows, each year is up and down, and each month is a little up or a little down. So we're all trying to read the tea leaves on that one and get out in front of it. But where do we see the logs of the future? The log we use, as I said, we're a dimension mill. What that means, dimension mill means we make basically 2x4s through 2x12s. We make a little bit of 4-inch material, so 4x4s or 4x6s, but that's it. As Tom was alluding to, there are other mills, and we sell our larger logs or some other specialty logs to some of these other mills that handle the bigger logs that we can't manufacture ourselves. And they make products that are wider or thicker and specialty products like cross arms for telephone poles and power poles, those more specialty items. for the log of the future, for speaking for our company, it's the log of today. It's a, it's going to be a 5-inch small end diameter up to about 28, 30-inch big end diameter. We continue, as Eric talked about his company, putting in new equipment, making that bigger, better, faster, stronger. That's how we are. In fact, last week or 2 weeks ago now, we put in a new piece of equipment in our Burlington mill that's called a profiler. It speeds things up in front of what our gang saw is, and what we're seeing already, immediate returns getting through that startup phase. It's making our mill faster. We got pretty close to a record run on Monday this week out of the mill, and that's after a week of the new installation. That's amazing and frightening as a log buyer to think about, because that shift or that day they really picked it up. So back to your question on pruning, and that there's 2 reasons to prune. One, you feel good about it as a landowner. That's a personal decision how your personal stand is going to look. 2, if you're looking at it for straight economics, do a return on investment. We own about, like I said, 2 million acres. We don't prune anything on our lands. We experimented with it about 30 years ago. Our return on investment for the products we make, again, didn't see that was going to be working, and it didn't work for us, frankly. We put more money into it. One, you're carrying those costs for a lot of years. To get the clear lumber that the pruning is designed to do, you have to prune that tree up quite a ways. It gets expensive. If you're only doing up, say, 20 feet, the bottom chunk, and you have to carry those costs for an additional 30, 40 years, you have to do your interest calculation out there. And what's the return on that? That one 20-foot segment, you might be able to get a better return on, but you still have probably 50% of the volume of that tree or more that is going to be above that segment, and you haven't increased the value of that at all. And now you're going to have to sort that, and do mills want that short log, or do we want long logs? So you have to measure the market and see what you can really sell it to. So there may be very good emotional reasons or aesthetic reasons to prune, but if you're going to do it for an economic reason, really think about what you might return. And the mills that want that high quality log, where are they located, and where's your tree farm located in relation to them? When we sell our larger logs, we have to truck them further. The dimension mills are more frequent than the large log mills at this point. So, and what's interesting is oftentimes probably most of the time, our log price is higher than the run of the mill. If it's a very high quality log, like a J sort, like Duane is buying for Japanese, or some of the mills buy for real high end, they will bring more money. But if it's just an average log, say, the dimension mills are paying more than the large log mills because we're more efficient. Does that answer the question, or more?
Yeah, we've got a little time to ask it. I'm going to ask the one a different way a little bit. Is so really what I'm hearing, if it's a Douglas fir, and if it's over 20 years old and has a 4-inch top, it's probably going to go through your mill.
4-inch top, we're not looking for. A 5-inch top.
Or
yes.
a 5-inch top, yeah.
Yeah, 5-inch small end diameter.
I mean, just a regular second growth log, that's what you take. So is there a knot size that's an issue for you? I mean, if we have really logs with a lot of knots, is that an issue? Will that be deducted, or how do you handle that?
Yeah, it's an issue of quality, and think about going to your lumber yard when you're going to be buying a piece of lumber. If you've got sort of a unit laid out there and you see one with lots of knots in it, that's the one you reach over to grab, the one that's clear, right? If all of us like to build with a little better product. There are lumber grades though, so if in the lumber unit you're looking at Home Depot, it's probably a 2 and better or a standard and better grade. if you've got lots of knots, it's not going to hit that grade. It's going to fall more into a utility or economy grade. We end up selling that product for pallets or packing or some other commodity. So can we use it? Yes. Is it as high a quality lumber? No. And when we go out and look at a stand, we assess that. And not all second growth logs are equal. Not all third growth logs are equal. And we will pay what we can assess that we can get out of that stand.
Okay. No, that sounds good. Thanks. And we'll probably have some time for some more questions in a minute too. So next question I had was for Brian. The last year has been a rough year for the hardwood lumber producers and log markets. You know, Washington Hardwood Commission and others have encouraged landowners to plant and manage for red alder. So Brian, what does your crystal ball look like for the future? And you talked a little bit about that before, but some of that you can repeat if you want. Is should we still be diversifying our tree farms with red alder and other hardwood species?
Yeah, Tom. You know, I wish that I had all the answers for that. For the future. You know, I could see into the crystal ball and tell you everything. But you know, as I said before, hardwood is a small percentage of a normal harvest. I believe that will continue in the future for the larger industrial, you know, tree farms with the management that they do. You know, the Washington Hardwood Commission, which Cascade Hardwood Group is a part of, has been pushing the planting of red alder. You know, as a forester and a log buyer for a hardwood mill, I urge, you know, landowners to plant red alder as well. Small forest landowners have the ability to do that more so than the larger industrial tree farms because of their scale to manage for a variety of species and the ability to hit some of the spikes in the markets on the end, you know, when they're selling the timber, unlike the industrial landowners that manage on a much larger scale for production. As for the hardwood lumber market in the future, you know, I believe that there'll always be a demand for our products. It is a marketplace that is changing and evolving. A great example is like what we were talking about earlier is the situation that we were in with a downturn of the export market for us, you know, in the last few years. You know, since that's happened, we've had to diversify and move our markets to other marketplaces, be it other countries overseas or, you know, a different variety of locations in the U.S. You know, and our lumber sales team, we've added a few more people scattered around the U.S. to help us have a better footprint on where we're selling our logs. And you know, moving forward, you know, as Bill has said and other people have said, is, you know, this is a market and a business place that changes and evolves all the time. So, you know, we just got to be ready to think outside the box and be able to keep moving forward and diversifying as marketplaces change. You know, as for the question, you know, that you had about competition of hardwood logs, you know, in the future, you know, I definitely think there will be competition for the logs in the future. Yes, the number of mills in Western Washington has gone down, but we're just producing more lumber out of the facilities that we have, you know, keeping up with, you know, what the production was before. You know, and, you know, the mills that are here in Western Washington today, like Eric said, they source their logs all over from Alaska to California. We do the same thing. You know, we barge logs in from other states. We have transfer yards as well, you know, in multiple locations that we buy into and haul logs to our mills. So, you know, with that being said, if we had more of it growing in Western Washington, we wouldn't have to do that. We'd be able to keep that money in the local economy versus having to buy logs outside of, you know, our local economies. You know, moving over kind of the, you know, going back to the minor hardwood species, you know, this is a great unknown, I guess, in our world of knowing what we are and aren't going to be able to cut moving forward. You know, we're exploring new markets every day, trying to figure out if there's a different way that we can cut a maple log to make it viable to buy it and mill it. The same with ash, oak, birch, cottonwood. All those marketplaces are a struggling point for us today. Future, it's hard to say. Like I said before, we were at the historic kind of average price, so our price, yeah, it's going to go up in the future. It's going to come back down. It's going to go up. It's going to come down. I can't say that it's going to go down and stay down, and I can't say that it's going to go up and stay up. It's just, it's a very up and down business. So that's what I have for the future, Tom.
Well, that's a good shot at it. I mean, you know as well as anybody, but yeah, obviously I asked you several times, and just my concern was on our tree farm, we still have quite a bit of maple. And so I'm looking pretty foolish right now when the prices are zero. But
right.
I appreciate what you said. I mean, yeah, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, yeah, it's a hard thing to say. I mean, if you would ask me 2 years ago, or what the maple market was going to be in 2 years, I would have said it would have been flat back then. I wouldn't have predicted us having these issues. And we all buy different. We buy timber different ways. SPI Bill there, they buy timber sales. We buy timber sales. I mean, we buy sales 2 years. We buy a sale today that we may not log for 2 years. And it's a tough thing to do when you don't know what the future brings. So, we've got some very expensive maple that I own. Just, so it's one of those things where it's a tough situation for everybody involved. Yeah, I'd love to say that we could buy your maple at 2 years ago prices and be able to break even, but we can't.
I think you just touched on something, and I know your company does work with small landowners. I mean, you and the other log buyers, and then I think even sometimes have been purchasing some property also. If you find hardwood stands that maybe you could use sooner or even in the future, you've been purchasing some.
Yeah. So yeah, no, we do a wide variety, as well as these other companies do too. We buy land and timber, we buy timber sales, we buy timber deeds, a lot of different varieties. Like you said about our other log buyers, we have Randy that's up north. He does a lot with small landowners, helping them with forest practice applications and such like that to help them, get their property permitted, and able to log it, that kind of thing. So, we bought an alder plantation that's an old Weyerhaeuser property a couple of years ago, where they were liquidating the property, and we saw the opportunity to go out and buy it. It's a small portion of the overall piece that we bought, but it's any way that we can keep that volume in our in our pocket to be able to log it when we need it for our facilities.
Well, and then you mentioned Randy, so I'll just make a plug, or make the comment. This is one thing that's nice about, all the sawmills, where the log buyers are so helpful to small landowners. And in Randy's case, he's a tree farm inspector for the Washington Tree Farm Program, and we just honored him as Inspector of the Year this year. And so really appreciate, the company supporting him to help small landowners get their land certified.
Yep.
So that was good. As I say certified, is that something, I haven't asked anybody else, but is there a preference for certified wood, or how do you look at certification, where it's SFI or FSC or even our tree farm? Does that make any difference in your markets or not?
So, we went through the whole certification process when this all first came out ourselves, to become certified, to be able to be in the chain of custody and all this kind of stuff, which it's a huge expense for the land, for the mills to have everything and go through all the certification and keep that certification up. In return for us, it's not there, to be honest, to keep that certification, spend the time, the effort, the money to keep everything separate in the bookkeeping and all the processes. some people would only buy it if it's certified, but that's a very small portion of what we sell is these people that have to have certified wood. And we just, it didn't make sense for us to stay certified, so we are no longer certified. So the bottom line is no, our products, there was no extra value added for us to have the certification and to buy or sell the certified wood.
I appreciate you saying that, because that's, we asked that, in the tree farm system, landowners ask us, why should it be certified or not? I know a few years ago, I should ask Bill that, and maybe later on we can talk to Bill about that too, was the chips. It was who was getting the pressure with some of the big pulp mills. The environmental groups were after them if they were sourcing their wood from old growth, forest or where it was coming from. And so that just got passed on to the mills. So then the mills had to tell the pulp mills where they were getting their wood from. But I don't know if that's still going on or not.
Well, I'm not the expert on pulp these days and that kind of stuff. But, we do buy it. But, Bill and those guys selling the softwood chips is in a whole different issue or set of circumstances right now with the way the pulp market is. We're still having luck selling our hardwood chips. But I've heard some horror stories over the guys selling the softwood chips and the pulp facilities, some not even running, that kind of situation at this time.
Okay, but it sounds like you are moving your hardwood chips in.
Yeah, no, we're doing all right with that. We've had a pretty steady flow leaving our yard, both as residuals from the mill and from our chipping operation in the yard. So we've done fine with that. It's just the softwood side I know is would be a good question for Bill.
Okay, so next let's talk to Eric again. Eric, red cedar prices have had its ups and downs, but it seems like they maintained a fairly high level when we were seeing limited manufacturers of cedar and more expenses transporting logs to the mills, and you mentioned that. So what does the cedar look, what do the future look like for cedar markets? And you mentioned substitute products could reduce the demand. So if you could talk some more about that. And then a lot of landowners, in fact, we had a question, and I was going to ask the same question, is, on our tree farm, I'd like to grow cedar, and we've been planting cedar every year. And so in the future, will there be a variety of markets for the cedar in the future, do you think? And you kind of answered that, but if you can talk about that some more, Eric, I would appreciate it.
Yeah, happy to, Tom. My video didn't pop up. You guys can you guys see me?
No, just your name, but we can hear you.
Okay, yeah, we'll get into it. Yeah, no, so it's definitely true, Tom, that the market for cedar has gone through some deep cycles. The last real big one was in 16, 17, and right now we're in I guess the peak of a pretty big one as well. And everybody likes to talk about cedar prices, kind of like export price, or one of those things where everybody likes to talk about who's getting the biggest number and how high is it going to go. And that's great. Landowners do really well during those times. And you ask, well, why does that spike so much in times like this when demand is good for cedar, finished cedar products? And it's again coming back to the fact that supply is so tight, right? We don't have access to pay more and get guys to cut more because it's just simply not there. The Doug Fir and Hemlock guys, they raise the price and guys go cut down another 200 acres. Well, that doesn't work that way in our world. So an increase in demand or extra overtime at these mills just puts more constraint on our raw material supply. And you ask about substitution. Well, it would be nice if we could pass on that that raw materials cost increase to Home Depot and Lowe's and ProBuild and all these places, and they just get people to pay more for cedar fence boards. But the reality of our world is that there are very good substitutes for cedar fence boards. Sometimes people have an affection for wood products and specifically cedar, but people are also price sensitive, builders especially, guys doing spec homes, homeowners. So we we saw this happen big time in 16 and 17, where we pushed the cedar fence board price so high to compensate for higher raw materials costs that we had import products come in. Japanese cedar, it was exported to China, then turned into fence boards, then brought into California, and it's a pretty nice substitute for cedar fence boards. Synthetics like vinyl and Trex, and even some of the metal products also stepped in when our prices got too high, and a lot of that ended up being a permanent loss of market share, right? So people just stuck with the import product, or they stuck with the synthetic product, and we didn't see that demand come back, and that consumption come back. So that is unfortunately the risk of these big spikes like this, is we run the risk of permanently eroding our market share over time. So that's ultimately kind of Alta's goal, is we want to make this cedar thing last as long as it can. Again, that's why we're putting the automation into our mills. That's why we've had a lot of consolidation over the years with acquiring or merging with companies. Again, the intent there is to hopefully keep our product priced high enough in the home centers that it gets a premium. We're able to pass that premium on to landowners, but we don't put so much pressure on it that we become substitutable, or we get removed from the market. So it's definitely a tightrope to walk for us. I think that same message is it's true for the current spike, but it's also true long term, right? I mean, the cedar supply isn't going to get any better. In fact, it's probably going to continue to shrink over time. But our goal is just to maintain that market share as long as we possibly can over the next 1 to 2 decades. The company obviously does have a crystal ball for that, and is developing, for example, out at our mill out at Grays Harbor, we are developing some different fence board products, spruce, some stained spruce products, because kind of our view is you'd rather be the one that substitutes yourself out of the market than have it be somebody else. So over time, the next 10, 20 years, we will see that transition. But I guess all that to say, your question about whether to grow Western red cedar or not, I think there will always be an appreciation and a good market for Western red cedar, just because it is such an iconic species. It will, in time, for many, many years from now, it'll likely become more of a boutique type product, but that will still, in my opinion, probably fetch a very high price. So I don't think it's a bad investment if you can find a way to keep the deer off it and get it above browse height. As everybody, all the tree farmers here know, it actually does pretty good in the right site conditions. You'll have some opportunities to do some boughs and specialized forest products as it grows. And then long term, hopefully it's Alta that can buy you guys a cedar and we turn it into fence boards, or somebody else will find something else very creative to do with it. But I think there will always be an appreciation and good opportunity to sell cedar logs. That's kind of what I have on that.
Well, good. That encouraged me enough. So I'm going to go ahead and keep planting it. So
yeah, good.
Thanks. The other thing, I don't know if I heard you say at the beginning, is the quality of the log that you need if you really care. I know I've sold logs to you before, and some of ours are pretty nice, but some are open grown where the knots can get pretty large and the trees are pretty tapered. And so what kind of issues do you have with different quality of logs?
Yeah, when you're sort of hanging there with your tongue out, you can't really be too specific, right? But no, we consume pretty much all grades, everything from old growth to second growth. We don't obviously like the 3 mil grade logs as far as knot size, big heavily heavily dense knotty logs. But it's just a 5-inch and up run of the mill cedar saw log. Really all we're looking for in our preferred lengths. We like to see folks reduce the defect percentage to somewhere around 10% or less, which means taking out most of the butt rot. Just manufacturing with some correct guidelines. But yeah, there's very few cedar logs that really don't work for us in one way or another. So.
Okay, thanks.
You bet.
And we will have some questions in a minute. I think I saw somebody was asking about cedar, so we'll have some questions.
You bet, guys.
So,
Thanks.
as far as the future, there's been many changes in the export markets and export companies over the years. What type of export opportunities will small forest landowners have in the next few years, or will we have any? And can you even see what species and quality of logs do you think will be in demand internationally?
Good question. Well, first of all, it's really tough to forecast the log trading business. And there's so many factors that impact this business. You've got economic forces, you've got natural events, you've got politics with the trade war, stuff like that, tariffs, and now we have pandemics to add to the list that all impact our global business. Well, one thing I do know is that the world will always need fiber. That's just what it is. I mean, I think it's one of the best building products. It's not just for building it, everything else from firewood to pulp. So, but I do know that, Japan, even though the volume has dropped, will still always demand a higher quality log. So, and they always will continue to pay a premium for that because that's what they want. I believe it's just a cultural thing in Japan that they want the best of things around the world. But one thing to remember though, not all sawmills in Japan require high quality. One of the largest sawmills, milling companies in Japan, is now asking for lower quality logs, a higher proportion of lower quality logs as far as high quality logs, because they have cogen plants. And in Japan, the government is signing 20-year contracts with sawmills to produce power, and they can sell the power back on the grid cheaper than they can buy it for their sawmill. So it's just a really interesting thing going on there. As far as Korea is concerned, they'll continue to consume Pacific Northwest logs, just at a lower rate until the European spruce dries up in Europe, which will happen at some point in time. Some are forecasting 5 to 10 years, and some experts are comparing that to the same beetle kill event that happened in the interior of BC. It's just now ended. So I mean, and I think that lasted probably 17 years or more. Japan will continue to seek cheap logs no matter where they can get them at. Like I said, quality doesn't matter. But I do believe though that as China starts to develop their middle class, they'll be building more stick frame homes as opposed to conditional or traditional concrete. And hopefully they'll start requiring higher quality logs to make that lumber. So I think that's going to happen. I was over there one time and visited a development, and they actually had like 400 stick frame homes that actually Canada is doing a really good job of promoting stick frame homes in Canada, and in China. So you might see that start to appear when, I don't know, but it's definitely some of it's heading that direction. So as far as species, I think, especially here in the Pacific Northwest for exporting, I think Douglas fir and hemlock are the primary species to export for construction around the world. Quality-wise, you're definitely want to have small knots, grow your stands closer together, then thin. I believe in thinning, so as well as my company. Well-scattered knots. It's interesting what Bill said too. Is it appears that and I don't know, I'm not a sawmill person, but it appears that most of the sawmills, not only here in the U.S. but also globally, have found that sweet spot where logs fly through the mill faster. And for exports, that's somewhere between 9 and 16 inches on the scaling end. And but that's for most of the sawmills that we've seen, at least our customers. But remember, some of the specialty sawmills in Japan will take a larger log because they're a specialty mill. They're still sawing the big beams for the hirakaku or for the traditional homes and stuff. But not only that, but here domestically, there's opportunities to sell large logs too. But unfortunately, those mills are spread from Everett all the way down to Riddle, Oregon. So, but there's a way to do that. If you can find somebody that has backhauls, you can do that. That's what we do. We buy logs into our Longview yard and get backhauls from trucks coming from Oregon, and they take them back down to the Riddle or Eugene area. Probably the biggest announcement that, if not everybody's heard, is that PLS is going out of business. Our parent company, Port Blakely, has made the difficult decision to wind down our operations. I don't know how that's going to affect the Pacific Northwest export market. There's still a few exporters out there, But as far as the Longview area, there will not be any competition for export down in Longview. So I don't know what that looks like. I mean, like I said, who knows? That's one of the things that I think nobody will know that until we actually we have stopped business. We shipped our last ship August 23rd, and now we're in the process of cleaning the Longview yard to sell it. So, and nobody's approached us to buy it yet. So that's all I got, Bill, Tom.
Well, yeah, that's a change.
It's a big
So,
change.
yeah. Well, I mean, PLS has always been a big player in export, but Weyerhaeuser's always been the big guy in town, I assume, and so they'll still be buying in the Longview area
Yeah, that and Olympia too.
and Olympia also.
Yep.
Yeah. And then you were saying that, the main species going export were the hemlock and the Douglas fir for sure. And what about hardwoods? I brought that up a couple of times now with Brian. At times there's been some export for hardwoods. Anything that you've seen there?
No, for hardwoods, most of the hardwoods are being exported off the East Coast. The red oaks and the oak trees and stuff like that. I think that, and Brian can speak this better than I can, but I believe it's the lumber, export of lumber more than the logs. So we've never done any hardwood exports. So.
Okay. Wow. Anything else, Duane?
Not that I can think of right now. I'm sure there'll be some questions, but especially about PLS out business.
Yeah. So hey, you guys did great. We're right on time. I really appreciate that, and really thanks for all the information. This turned out even better than I'd hoped, and I hope the audience appreciates it too. And so we're going to talk about some questions. So the next 20, 25 minutes, do questions. But on the first question I'm going to ask, and then I'm going to partly answer myself, and then I'll ask the panelists if they have extra input. And that question is, what are some of the resources available to landowners to access, that they can access to track log prices? And two that I've used in the past is that landowners could consider is, one is the Department of Natural Resources website. And if you go to their website, you go to timber sales, and it's timber sales query log prices. What they do is they'll track log prices on a monthly basis. And they also keep those records. So if you need, we've used them for taxes or estate planning or something like that, you can go back and look for 5 or 6 years and find the prices for a particular year and month. And the other log report that I use it's John Lindbergh's Washington and Oregon Log Market Report. And John's report is a subscription, and he does it monthly except for December. And he not only tracks log prices each month, but has tons of other market information, economic data. He actually, both of them do. They'll contact log buyers and try to find out where the markets are each month. But John puts a lot of information into his. So like I said, it's a subscription, but it's something you might want to consider. So panelists, is there anything else that you can think of as a good way that landowners could possibly track log prices and kind of see where things are going?
Hey, Tom, this is Brian.
Yeah, Brian.
I would just say that your comment about the DNR's website and that price sheet, because the prices they have in there are prices that us, the log buyers, give them. So it's something that, for us to, we know it's right. It's numbers that we've given them every month. They send us out a request for prices monthly. We fill it out, send it back to them on a monthly basis. So I strongly urge that one. And then John Lindbergh's, same kind of scenario. John calls around every month to everybody looking for information to put into his reports and such. So those are probably the two best that you're going to find, in my opinion, that are, ones that I could stand behind. I mean, because I know that they call or email and ask for numbers. You know, other than that, you can build relationships with us, the log buyers. Call us. We're more than happy to talk. That's what we do all day. We talk to landowners, we talk to people that are selling logs, send us an email every 3-4 months, whatever you want to do, to contact us, and we'll let you know what we're paying. Or if we're buying, or, that's the big thing that landowners need to realize is, mills are not always buying logs. So you need to make sure before you cut trees that you are calling to verify that. That's something that I wanted to add in there.
No, that's a good point, Brian. And maybe the rest of you could comment on that too, if you had any resources. But, I don't know about a lot of small landowners, but I don't know, they might be reluctant to call or talk to the mill log buyers. So how about each of you just kind of talk about that a little bit, whether that would be something you would recommend a small landowner, even if you had 3 or 4 loads of logs to do to contact your buyers or not.
Now, I'll jump in first since I'm on here.
Sure.
Bill made the comment right away that he buys from people that sell 1 load to thousands of loads. We do the same thing, as I know Eric probably does the same thing. We're buying, when you're such a small portion of a harvest, it's tough. So you got to buy logs from everybody that's selling for us.
Yeah, agreed. I'll dogpile on that. I encourage landowners to call, and oftentimes I'll get a guy saying, "Oh, well, where are you going to be next month?" I said, "Well, call me next month." I can tell you where we are today, and when I to answer Tom's question about the what prices you can monitor, those are the 2 best sources, I'd say too. The one caveat and the one caution I would say, the day that that's quoted, it becomes history. So, what was quoted last week is not what necessarily is happening this week. Markets are so dynamic. You've heard every one of us say that. So another phone call wouldn't hurt. Call to confirm, and call everybody. I mean, you just heard Duane say the export market's not as good. Call them anyway, because that will change in a heartbeat, and suddenly they're the top dog again, and the domestic markets aren't as good. We sell logs every day because we have to sell our cedar, we sell our hardwoods, we sell our oversized logs. And if we can make more money selling poles, we're constantly checking that market. We are doing the same thing. So, yep, pick up the phone, call. We have lots of log buyers, and they will answer your questions.
So Eric or Duane, you comment on that?
Yeah, I was going to say, both Bill and Brian put on right here on the head. Just call. And for the export, did I lose mine? You still hear me?
Yes.
Okay. I got a thing flashed on the screen, like maybe I froze up. But yeah, because even the export business, right now, we're really competing hard with the domestic mills. But we may need a certain species or a certain sort that would be willing to pay for just to finish a cargo for a ship. So, I mean, you just got to call and talk to log buyers. I think that's the best solution. And Bill said it perfectly. We can't tell you what the price is going to be next month because we don't know yet. So because the market's developing, but definitely call and keep calling, because there might be a certain timber type that we're interested in and we're willing to pay more money for because we need it. So.
Only other thing, this is Eric, Tom, the only thing I would add to that for my specific world is, again, we buy at about a 2,000 square mile radius. So, if you're in Boise, Idaho, or Craig, Alaska, give us a call. There's probably a chance we're buying in that location. So.
Well, and then the other thing I think all of you would, well, it depends on your time, but the other thing would be that a lot of times your log buyers will come out. So that's a good option also. Nick and Patrick, do you have the questions that some of our attendees have been asking that we can ask the panelists right now?
Yeah, so this question, I believe, is directed towards Bill. Um, and it's the CME lumber futures index has essentially doubled in the last couple of months. Is there any correlation between the lumber CME index and the aggregate log prices in the Pacific Northwest?
I'm not an expert on the futures market. What I guess I would, the way I would feel that, and so one of these other guys may know the futures market better, but what I would say is the trend is up. Like I said earlier too, our log prices are up about 50% over where they were last year. You're saying the CME market's doubled. Why aren't we doubled, if that's your question? I would look at trends, because lumber prices are different than log prices. We also have manufacturing in what we have to put on top of that log price, and handling the shipping and everything else. What I think I know of the lumber market is it's, for every winner, there's a loser. It's not a, there's some riverboat gambler spirit in that marketplace as well. So it kind of has a life of its own. And I guess I'll stop at that, because I'm not familiar, and I don't dabble in the futures market. I try and stick in what I know. And
any of the other panelists, any comments on that question? Well, I guess I don't know if we answered their question or not, but I think Bill made a good try at it. So Nick, was there anything else?
Yeah, so we had Eric sort of address the long-range future for cedar, like cedar fence board market 50 years out. The question is, what else could cedar be used for other than niche market for poles?
Well, that's a bit of a tough question for me. Kind of, I'm pretty heavily focused on obviously cedar fence boards, but cedar's not technically ever really been that structural. So my guess would be it was something architectural or ancillary construction type product. In the future. But again, I think anybody that knows anything about trees and lumber, there's always that iconic connection to cedar. So that's why I pretty firmly believe that it will always remain used in some capacity, probably a visual capacity, where people can see and appreciate, appreciate its beauty, and then maybe even some of its other intrinsic properties like rot and bug resistant as well. So hard for me to say what it could be when in the future, but I fully expect that it will be around as long as it wants to grow. So.
Well, Eric, the other thing maybe you can comment on is some of the other mills do sell other products out of cedar. So I think some of them still do decking and siding and some of those. I don't know if you can make a comment about that, if that has some future or not, or what's your opinion on that?
Yeah, so you're right, Tom. Obviously, decking is a big one. Dimensional 2x4, 2x6 is big. Decking, as far as substitution, has been under even more pressure than we have by far. With the advent or the invention of Trex decking and the other synthetics, they've really gotten beat up in recent years. So that their market share has been retreating. Siding, similar. Right, with a lot of the hardy plank type products, they've been losing ground as well. Fencing seems to be the one that really a lot of growth still there. Again, we can sell all we can make right now. So I guess as long as we don't run ourselves out of business by by charging too much or becoming too expensive, I really think that, you know, the opportunity is still going to be intense for the foreseeable future.
Well, and you didn't mention it, but, you know, living up by the Canadian border, I know, you know, the Canadians still have a lot, well, even old growth cedar for their cutting. So they, you go to the lumber yards up our way, it's surprising some of the quality of cedar you see that's come out of Canada. I saw fence boards that were just beautiful vertical grain, clear cedar in one of the lumber yards. I was very surprised. And so I think there's some options there too, but thanks. Unless you had something else follow up with that.
You bet. No, I think that about covers it, Tom. Thanks.
Okay. So Nick, what else? You got some other questions?
So one question from folks was there an email contact? Yes, they're found in the bio section under the events page. We'll send out links for folks on the speakers post session. The next question was, this is from Andy, and it's for everyone, is, you know, can you sort of describe, or can you explain your relationship and how you work with consulting foresters? You know, if that differs when communicating with landowners.
So I'll take that one on first, I guess. You know, as with landowners, I mean, we deal with them both on a day-to-day basis. You know, just the consulting foresters, I mean, they're guys that we may also hire at times if we don't have time to permit stuff ourselves. You know, and there's more of a long-term relationship there where they're coming to us, you know, multiple times a year with multiple different landowners that they're representing, you know, versus a small forest landowner that may come to us with a harvest every 10 or 20 years. So there is, you know, potentially a better relationship there, but, you know, as a landowner, you can also build that relationship with the phone calls, the emails. You know, Tom's comment about coming out and looking at your trees, we do that all the time. So if there's interest, if you want us to come out and look at your hardwood trees, or if, you know, Bill's got guys that work for him that he, you know, would go out and look at your Doug fir, and Eric the same with cedar. So, you know, I feel that there's an opportunity for small landowners to have that same relationship. It just takes a little more time to build.
I'll add to that. I mean, most of the people that work in the woods, whether they're log buyers or consulting foresters, they love talking about the business. And probably the same thing about you as small private landowners. You love talking about your tree farm. So we'll go. I've gone out, I can't tell you countless times when somebody calls up, they don't even have something that's mature yet, but just wants some advice on growing. We're in a sense, we're all consultants too. And we want to help you with your tree farms, and I work with plenty of landowners and giving them plenty of advice, and always tell them the same thing: call the exporters, call my competition. You got to be comfortable with what you're getting. So we do the same thing with consultants. You know, I think you'll find we're pretty approachable.
No, I'd add to that too, is you know, we actually, in the export business, because we're looking for a fairly specific log, it's actually better for us to work with consultants who understand the business. It just makes it easier for us, as far as, and then somebody mentioned, like Brian mentioned, as opposed to a landowner that only harvests once every 20 years or 40 years. So it makes it a lot easier to consult, to talk to somebody that actually knows the business. And we do the same thing. You know, we always have to go look at the stands to understand what it is before we buy it. So yeah, I mean, well, we used to do that. We don't do that anymore, but anyway, yes, but I definitely call export, you know, your local exporter, and I'm sure they'd be more than willing to come out and look at your stand. So thank you.
Nothing really to add for me, Tom. No, I mean, we all know these consulting foresters, they talk to us regularly. So they're an excellent resource for landowners to call as you know, a first point of contact or to hire. Highly recommend them.
So what else do you have, Nick?
Yeah, so another question from Andy about, we've talked about West Side. How about on the pines for the East Side? Can anyone speak to, sorry, I'm looking at can anyone give an update or even educated hearsay for East Side folks? Because no one's West Pine.
Yeah, I can step in if you'd like. We at our mills here in Washington don't run pine ourselves. We've got 8 mills in California. We run a lot of pine. In Washington, the east side, your pine market is on the very east side of the market place. You got Boise Cascade out there and Vaughan Brothers. And then you go into Idaho with the Idaho Forest Group. But also down on the Columbia River, you've got the Warm Springs tribe has a mill there just outside of Yakima. No, not Warm Springs tribe, sorry, Yakima tribe has a mill. They do a lot of pine. On this side of the hill, pine's not so popular. Hampton Lumber up in Morton and Randall, they'll run pine. Occasionally in Darrington, Hampton will run pine. I'm not sure if they're currently buying. Again, those phone calls are what you need to do. So that's, and then export. Oftentimes the pine has been going export too. And right now Duane might be able to add to that, but Foremark in Tacoma is an exporter, or Frederickson is where their yard is, and they will be buying pine at times. So there are markets out there.
Yeah. We've actually had customers ask for pine, and in Japan, and obviously in China, but also to Japan. So yeah, so I mean, there's definitely a market, but it just depends on what, like we've all been talking, what the market cycle is, and there's even what the price is, because you have to be able to transport it to Longview if it's going to be bulk, or get it someplace where you can put it in a container, and that just adds to cost. So but yeah, there definitely is a desire for it as far as exporting.
I guess I'll add one more thing on pine. A lot of times in the middle part of the state, Lake Wenatchee, Leavenworth area, that pine will actually go down to La Grande in Oregon. Boise Cascade has a mill down there also, and it's trucked an awful long way. So you don't forget your East Side Oregon mills too if you're selling.
So Nick, you got some more questions, or how are we doing?
And I'm just looking at the bottom of the chat here. I don't see anything else coming in at the moment.
Well, can I just add one thing? Somebody asked something about certification, was talking about certification, and we are certified. All our mills are certified and our lands. And I think most of the major companies, it's that way. And it's, do we get more money for it? No. As Brian said, it's the cost of doing business. Sometimes it gives you some entree into some places that you wouldn't otherwise get, but we have way more certification credits than we can sell because the demand is not there.
Yeah, thanks for that, Bill. I was going to comment on certification too. Actually, in Japan, we're seeing more and more customers requiring certified logs for the sawmills, because their customers on the lumber side are asking for it too. So that's something to be aware of. So certification would be good, especially on the export side of it.
And then what about Eric? You got any comment on the certification? Everybody else has talked about it.
We don't, I mean, while I encourage it just from a, best management practices as far as your tree farm, they've got a lot of good benefits. Alta doesn't actually have any premium for it. We don't certify any of our products, so it doesn't necessarily result in a higher log price, but I guess just from best management, it's not a bad idea.
So do you have any more, Nick?
I might. We're trying to
Okay.
get here.
Hey, Nick, there was one question that someone submitted to the Q&A function down there instead of the chat box.
Gotcha.
From Lawson and Pam Starnes, it was not to any particular panelist, so whoever wants to go for it, please do. Are the domestic mills willing to continue buying cut-to-length logs from harvester forward or thinnings versus long logs?
I can field that because it's, I mean, we do buy those logs. They are lower quality. We pay less money because basically if you're cut to length, we're handling twice the number of pieces for the same amount of volume because your maximum length is much smaller. And it's a thinning, it's smaller diameter. But we do buy it. We'll generally buy that by the ton because it's to measure those 120 to 140 log loads is a nightmare for our scalers, and it's kind of like Groundhog Day. Each load looks like the last one, so we'll flip out a tonnage price and go with that.
Hey, Eric.
Yeah, we buy them, same thing. We, you know, our pricing matrix is length specific. So we have a lower price for the shorter logs, but you know, we certainly buy them all the way down to 12 feet. Typically, one thing you don't see cedar being cut to length thinned out of a stand, and it's one of the ones that gets left behind actually. So it's not something we encounter very often, but we certainly buy them.
What about the hardwoods, Brian?
No, we're in the same boat as these other guys. I mean, occasionally, you know, you'll get the cut to length thinning, like on some of the warehouse or plantations that they're, you know, in actively thinning for some of their hardwood plantations. And we buy them, you know, both pulp and the saw logs. You know, so it's something that we see, you know, a couple months out of the year where we see a diet of it. It's, you know, you just have to price it accordingly. Like Bill said, it's a lot more handling for a lot less volume. So, you know, you just got to look at it that way. But definitely interested in all volume.
Okay, well, that sounds good. I think we'll wrap this up.
Oh, Tom,
And-
we've got one more question here for, this is for either Bill or Duane.
Okay.
With 40 or less year rotation, is commercial thinning worth it? Sorry to
Hear that one, Duane?
I guess that'd be a decision on the landowner, and then because you really, if you PCT and then thin at 30, you could get a bump in diameter at age 40. So I mean that's just a choice, and I think Andy said it earlier. You just got to plan what you want the end result of your stand to be. But you can still export 40-year-old logs. So that's just.
I guess what I'd answer that question is we do commercial thinning on our lands because we find it worthwhile for our investment and what we're growing. So, yes.
Good, thanks. I think Nick, we will cut it off now so we keep on time. If your question didn't get answered, or you have one, you think of one later, send it to Elizabeth at that info@lawtreefarm.org, and we're going to gather the answers from the speakers, and we'll send them out to all the attendees today so everybody can see the answers. So if you had a few more questions, just send them in to us and we'll take care of that. So don't leave yet. I've got a couple other things I want to talk about before we close up. We've had, well, one thing I want to do right now is a really, really big thank you for all our speakers today. They've taken the time to share their knowledge with us. I mean, this has really turned out great. We really appreciate that. So, hey, let's try an online, real big applause for our speakers. Hey. Great, we can do that online too. And so, as we conclude this session of the fall seminar, I want to remind you that 1 week from today, Nick Kuntz is going to be hosting our next session on emerging markets, and that's going to be Wednesday, September the 2nd. And then 2 weeks from today, on September the 9th, Patrick Schultz would be the moderator for our last session on special forest products. And they'll both be in the same time slot as today. So I just wanted to point out that each of our sessions was, designed for tree farmers with different interests, but you'd actually learn a lot more by attending all of them. And so I know in the next 2 sessions, they have some really good speakers lined up. So if you haven't registered already for those, you should do that on our website. And if you've enjoyed this year's fall seminar series from the Washington Tree Farm Program, we really would appreciate your financial support and encourage you to go to our website to make a donation. The committee has put a lot of time and energy into this new format of education, would appreciate your support. When we were planning for this seminar, we debated whether to charge or not and decided not to have a set price and just rely on your generosity. So thank you for your support of the Washington Tree Farm Program. So lastly, we would appreciate if you take a few minutes and fill out the post-session 1 survey. And this will help us tremendously to figure out how we did today with our first online seminar and how to improve in the future. And also there's a place where you can write in subjects that you might be interested in for future fall seminars. And Nick mentioned that you can either go to the chat box or we can email you a survey link for you. And then when you go to that link, there's 2 sections to it. The first is the survey, and then the second section is for the SAF Certified Forester or Master Loggers continuing education credits. And if you're not interested in the credits, you go to the second page, and then where it says submit, go ahead and get that, and that completes the survey. So we really appreciate it if you would do that. And so that's all I've got. Nick, is there anything I've forgotten that we should share before we close?
We finished on time.
That was my goal. And
Perfect.
Good.
Thank you.
I can't thank the speakers enough for keeping us on time. So that's the end of our first seminar here with the Washington Tree Farm Program fall seminar session. And we appreciate very much for you joining this afternoon, and have a good evening. So goodbye for now. Thanks.